My name is Walter Hayes, 62 years old, retired warehouse manager. I spent 40 years of my life moving freight through docks and distribution centers, keeping other men's promises on schedule. My back is stiff, my hands rough, but my numbers have always been steady. That was my pride. No shipment lost, no ledger cooked. After Sharon, my wife, passed 2 winters ago, the house felt empty. My son Michael checked in when he could. My daughter Karen called from out of state. Holidays became fewer voices around the table. The one who filled that silence most often was my brother-in-law, Mark Whitmore. Slick talker, always with a new business scheme. He married my late sister, then folded himself into the family like he belonged at the head of it. Folks said he was sharp, forward-thinking. I thought he was just restless. 2 weeks before Christmas, a letter came. Heavy paper, the kind banks still use for official notices. Delinquent payment reminder, loan account, $250,000. My name was typed at the top. Beneath it, a signature that looked like mine, except I knew I'd never signed for any loan, not $1. I sat at the kitchen table staring at it, the same table where I used to balance grocery lists and overtime checks. My chest felt heavy. A mistake, I thought at first. Some clerk keyed the wrong name. But the more I looked at that signature, the colder my gut turned. That evening, I brought it to Michael. He read it, frowned. "Dad, are you sure you didn't forget signing something? You've been under stress." His words stung worse than the paper cut on my thumb. Forget? My own son thought I was slipping. When I told Mark, his smirk lingered too long. "Relax, Walt. Paperwork mixes up all the time. Don't go digging where you don't need to." He patted my shoulder like I was a child. Something was wrong. I could feel it under my skin, sharper than winter air. And I had no idea. This was only the first crack before the dam burst. The Friday before Christmas, Mark invited half the family to dinner at a steakhouse downtown. Said it was on him this year. The place reeked of cigars and money, mahogany tables, waiters in black vests, prices so high they didn't print them on the menu. I wore my best jacket, the same one I'd worn to Sharon's funeral. Michael and Karen sat on either side of me, trying to ease the silence that always came when Mark started talking shop. Halfway through the meal, he tapped his glass with a fork. "Family, I have an announcement." His smile stretched like a man who'd just won a lottery ticket he didn't buy. After years of hard work, I've secured financing for Whitmore Ventures' new expansion. $250,000 loan, signed and sealed. The table erupted in polite claps. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Loan. The number matched the paper on my kitchen table. Mark leaned back, raised his wine. And none of this would be possible without the support of my good brother-in-law, Walter. He was gracious enough to co-sign, showed real faith in me when I needed it most. My stomach dropped. Conversations around me blurred. Michael's eyes darted to mine. Karen's hand tightened on my arm. "I never," the words caught in my throat. Mark didn't miss a beat. "Come now, Walt, don't be modest. You've always been a numbers man. You know a good investment when you see one." Laughter rippled through the table. A cousin raised his glass. To Walter, finally putting that warehouse money to use. Heat burned through my chest, not from the wine I hadn't touched. My own family looked at me like a fool, like I'd quietly bet my savings on Mark's dream. I set my fork down, forced my voice steady. "I didn't sign any loan." Mark chuckled. "Of course you did. Maybe you've forgotten, but don't worry. We've got the paperwork safe and sound." He winked, and the smirk on his lips told me exactly what he wanted. my silence. I sat there in that expensive room, humiliation pressing down like a weight. They thought I'd lost my memory. They thought I was too old, too tired to fight. But as I looked at Mark raising his glass in my name, one thought burned hotter than the shame. This was just the beginning. The night after that dinner, I drove to Mark's office building. Sleek glass facade, lit up like a Christmas tree. My reflection in the lobby doors looked older than I felt. Creased face, shoulders stiff, but fire in the eyes. The receptionist blinked when I walked in. "He's busy, Mr. Whitman. Tell him it's Walter," I said, "and I'm not leaving." 10 minutes later, Mark appeared, grinning like the steakhouse scene had never happened. "Walt, you should have called." I followed him into his corner office, walls lined with photos of him shaking hands with men in suits. He shut the door and leaned on the desk. "What's on your mind?" "You know damn well," I said. "That loan, my name's on it, and I didn't put it there." His smile didn't falter. "I think you're confused. Papers are signed. Bank has everything on file. You must have forgotten." I slammed my fist on his desk, the sound echoing against the glass walls. "Don't you dare talk to me like I'm senile. I never touched that paper." For the first time, a flicker of irritation crossed his face. "Walter, lower your voice. People will think you've lost it. That's what you want, isn't it? Me looking crazy, so you can drain my savings while everyone pats you on the back." Mark leaned in, voice low. "Careful. You start throwing around words like forgery. You'll make yourself look paranoid. Who do you think the bank will believe? The tired widower who misremembers things, or the successful businessman with spotless records?" The room felt colder than the December air outside. His words hung there, daring me to push further. I stared at him, chest tight, rage bubbling just under the surface. I wanted to shout, to grab those files from his desk and rip them open. But instead, I let the silence stretch. Because as much as it hurt, he was right about one thing. Without proof, all I had were accusations. I finally turned toward the door. Mark called after me, voice casual as a man discussing weather. "Don't make a scene, Walter. Family sticks together. You'll thank me when the dividends roll in." I didn't answer. My hand gripped the doorknob until my knuckles whitened. Then I walked out. Behind me, his laughter followed, sharp, knowing, cutting deep. And for the first time, I realized this fight was going to be dirtier than I'd imagined. By Christmas Eve, word had spread through town. I couldn't walk into the grocery store without someone slapping me on the back, saying, "Heard you finally took a risk, Walter. Good for you. Good for me." That's what they called it, while my stomach twisted every time I opened my wallet. The worst came at church. Pastor Reynolds mentioned me during the service, thanking me for backing the community's brightest entrepreneur. Heads turned, eyes soft with admiration. If only they knew the truth. Michael was furious. "Dad, he's dragging your name through mud." Karen tried to soothe him, whispering, "Let it go, it'll pass." But it wasn't passing. It was spreading. That evening, I found my old friend Sam Jenkins waiting on my porch. Vietnam vet like me, gray beard, walks with a limp from shrapnel he still carries. He didn't waste words. "Walter, I saw Mark down at the Rotary Club. He was bragging about that loan. Said you were finally smart enough to trust his vision." Sam spat into the snow. "Problem is, I know you better than that. You didn't sign squat, did you?" I shook my head. "Not a damn thing." Sam narrowed his eyes. "Then he forged you. Plain and simple." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded flyer. "And you'll want to see this." It was an announcement. Whitmore Ventures, New expansion opening soon. At the bottom, in bold print, backed by veteran Walter Whitman, proud investor. My throat burned. He wasn't just stealing my money. He was weaponizing my service, my reputation, to sell his scam. Sam slapped the flyer against my chest. "You can't let this stand. You want help, you call me." I looked at my friend, scarred, weathered, loyal to the bone, and for the first time since this began, I didn't feel entirely alone. But standing there in the cold, with the flyer crumpled in my hand, I knew one thing for certain. Mark's betrayal wasn't just about money anymore. It was about erasing me, rewriting my story as his stepping stone, and that was going to cost him more than he could ever imagine. Christmas morning should have smelled like cinnamon rolls and pine. Instead, my kitchen smelled of burnt coffee and silence. I sat alone at the table, a single plate in front of me with cold, scrambled eggs I hadn't touched. The phone sat by my elbow, dark and quiet. Michael had taken Karen and the kids to her parents' place, said they didn't want drama at their Christmas dinner. Drama. That's what they called their father being publicly humiliated. I stared at the old photo on the fridge, me in uniform, Sharon holding baby Michael in her arms, back when family meant trust, not betrayal. The house was colder than usual. Draft slipped through the windows I hadn't gotten around to sealing. I thought about turning on the old space heater but didn't bother. Why waste the electricity? At noon, I walked to the mailbox. Snow crunched under my boots. Inside was a crisp envelope from the bank. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Notice of payment due. Co-signed loan, $250,000. First installment, $3,800 due January 5th. The numbers blurred as my eyes burned. My pension barely covered property tax and groceries. $3,800 might as well have been $1 million. I slumped against the porch railing, letter crumpled in my fist. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Keller, gave me a pitying look as she loaded gifts into her son's SUV. She raised a hand, half wave, half sympathy. It felt like she was waving at a man already finished. That night, I microwaved a frozen dinner and sat in front of the TV with the volume low. Every channel seemed to show families laughing around glowing trees. I clicked the screen off. The reflection staring back was an old man abandoned by his own blood, accused of backing a lie, trapped in a debt he never touched. For the first time in years, I whispered into the dark, "Sharon, I wish you were here." The silence that answered pressed heavy on my chest. And that's when I realized I wasn't just broke or humiliated. I was invisible, forgotten, but only for now. Because beneath the weight of despair, a new thought was clawing its way up. If Mark thought he'd buried me, he hadn't seen me dig. 2 days after Christmas, I woke before dawn. The house was dark, the air sharp with winter chill, but something in me felt different. The weight of despair hadn't vanished. It had shifted, hardened into something sharper. I boiled water for instant coffee, sat at the table and spread out the crumpled bank letter, the flyer Sam had given me, and a yellow legal pad. 3 pieces of paper, 3 reminders of how far Mark had pushed me. Sam's words echoed in my head. He forged you, plain and simple. For days I'd let shame eat at me, let silence choke me. But what did shame ever fix? What did silence ever protect? I picked up a pen and wrote one word at the top of the pad. Proof. The word looked stronger than I felt, but as the ink dried, something in me clicked. Proof was the only weapon that mattered. Not anger, not yelling across a desk, but evidence that no one could deny. I thought about the bank, about signatures and ledgers, about the notary stamp I knew I'd never seen. Mark might have fooled the family with speeches and wine, but financial institutions left trails, paperwork, copies, records. Then I thought about the flyer, the one using my name as bait. If he'd plastered my face and veteran status across promotional material, there had to be emails, drafts, files tying him to the lie. And Sam. Old Sam had connections. Rotary members who didn't trust Mark as much as they pretended. People who talked after a few bourbons. The more I scribbled, the straighter my back sat. By the time the sun pushed pale light through the kitchen curtains, I had 2 full pages of names, places, and steps. I leaned back, staring at the list. For the first time in weeks, my heart wasn't dragging in my chest. It was beating with a purpose. Mark thought he'd cornered me with his forgery. But he'd forgotten one thing. I'd spent a lifetime in factories, in union halls, in boardrooms that tried to squeeze the little guy. I knew how to fight back when someone tried to erase me. And this time, I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for my name. I closed the pad, slid it into the drawer, and whispered into the cold morning air. He started this war. I'll be the one to end it. By New Year's Eve, my plan had teeth. I sat at the kitchen table again, this time with Sam across from me, his cane leaning against the wall. He read my scribbled notes with a grunt of approval. "You're thinking like a soldier again, Walt. Step by step, no wasted moves. Step 1 was the bank. If my name was forged, there'd be a paper trail. Loan documents required notarization, witness signatures, even IDs copied. If the bank had a file, I wanted it. And if it didn't match me, if the notary had stamped a ghost, that was my first crack in Mark's armor. Step 2 was digital. The flyer using my name hadn't come from thin air. It had been designed, printed, and distributed. Sam's nephew worked in IT. He'd agreed to help me pull metadata, track the emails. Mark loved email blasts, and once sent, they never truly vanished. Step 3 was people, neighbors, Rotary members, even cousins. Mark had bragged too loudly, too often. I needed their words, statements, texts, voicemails, something tying his arrogance to the scheme. And step 4, the most important, timing. I wasn't going to quietly slip evidence to a lawyer and wait. No, I'd learned something from Mark. Humiliation cuts deepest when it's public. "Let him stand tall," Sam muttered, lighting a cigarette despite my protests, "then chop his knees out." I nodded. "He wants everyone to believe I backed his scam? Fine. I'll let him think I'm beaten. Let him keep smiling at banquets. Keep using my name as bait. The bigger the stage, the harder he falls." Sam leaned forward. "And when you've got the proof?" I tapped the yellow pad, where one word sat circled in heavy ink. Boardroom. Mark's company's quarterly shareholder meeting was in February. Every investor, every banker, every family member who thought he walked on water would be there. "That's when I end it," I said. Sam's grin was sharp, wolfish. "Now you're talking." For the first time in weeks, I felt heat in my chest that wasn't shame. It was fire, controlled, focused, and hungry. As midnight fireworks cracked in the distance, I closed my notebook. "Mark thinks he wrote me out of the story," I whispered. "But at that meeting, he'll learn the ending belongs to me." The first move came in January, when the snow was still thick on the roads and the world felt muffled under white silence. I walked into Valley First Bank wearing my old wool coat and the steady expression of a man who'd seen more winters than their young tellers could count. The clerk glanced up, polite smile plastered on, until I slid the loan notice across the counter. "I want to see the documents," I said. She hesitated. "Sir, that's confidential. It's my name on the paper. You either bring me the file, or I bring the sheriff." My voice carried the weight of decades, and after a beat, she nodded and disappeared into the back. 15 minutes later, a manager appeared. Thin tie, nervous eyes. He handed me a manila folder. Inside, I saw my name printed neat across multiple pages. Loan agreement, co-signed signature line, stamped and sealed. And there it was, the signature. My name scrawled in a shaky imitation. Close, but not mine. The T crossed too low, the W too wide. I'd signed thousands of time cards, checks, and contracts in my life. That wasn't me. I flipped another page and felt my jaw tighten. Attached was a photocopy of a driver's license, mine. Except it wasn't. The picture was grainy, edges blurred. Someone had duplicated my ID. "That's a fake," I said flatly. "I never stood in front of your notary. That isn't my hand on those lines." The manager stammered, "Sir, if there's been a mistake, we'll—" "Mistake? This is fraud. And when I prove it, you'll want to be on the right side of it." I tucked the folder into my coat before he could argue. Physical evidence. Proof, sitting heavy against my chest. That night, I spread the pages on my kitchen table under the lamp. Sam sat across from me, squinting through cigarette smoke. "Well, Walt," he said, tapping the forged signature with a calloused finger. "You've got him. Clear as day." I shook my head. "Not yet. This shows forgery, sure. But he'll claim I forgot. Or I signed under pressure. He'll twist it." Sam leaned back, smirking. "Then we find more. You've got the first nail for his coffin. Now let's hammer it in front of everyone." I gathered the papers, slid them into a leather binder. My hands didn't tremble this time, because this wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was evidence, and when the day came, I was going to bury him with it. The quarterly shareholder meeting was louder and colder than I expected. The conference room in the hotel smelled like overbrewed coffee and perfume. A long mahogany table sat under bright lights, and on one wall a glossy placard read, "Whitmore Ventures. Q1 shareholder briefing." Investors in navy suits murmured. Reporters idled with notepads. Family filled a side row like extras in a bad play. Mark stood at the podium, polished and practiced, delivering slides filled with projections and glossy logos. He smiled at every point, the kind of smile that makes people forget to ask inconvenient questions. Michael sat a few rows back, his jaw tight, but his posture polite. Karen's hands were folded so tightly her knuckles whitened. When the quanda opened, Mark brushed off every probe with charm. Then, when he least expected it, I rose. "Excuse me," I said, voice steady enough that a few heads turned. "I have a question for the board." Whispers ran like ripples. Mark's smile flickered. I set my leather binder on the table in front of the microphone and clicked it open like laying down a gauntlet. The room quieted on instinct. I didn't feel the room's eyes as accusation, but as witnesses I needed. "I'd like to show everyone the paperwork that backed that big loan you announced," I said. "Because my name's on that loan, and I never signed it." I opened to the Valley First folder, slid the certified copies forward, and let the bank manager in the front row verify the stamp and the date for anyone who cared to look. I pulled the forged power of attorney out next, the notary stamp glaring. "This signature," I said, tapping the line, "is a forgery. That driver's license isn't mine. That account, Hayes Ventures, received $500,000 from my retirement. And the flyer using my name, Pamela in marketing can confirm she sent the blast." Gasps cut the room. A woman at the back whispered, "He used Walter's reputation to recruit investors." The murmurs swelled. Mark rose, color draining. Walter, this is a stunt. He's confused. His voice broke when I set another paper on the podium. Sam's note, with dates and a voice memo transcript, where Mark bragged to a Rotary Club member about using veterans' ties to close deals. Play it, I said. Sam's nephew, who'd been helping me with digital forensics, stepped forward and tapped play on his phone. Mark's voice, casual and cruel, filled the room. He won't know. Old men forget. Use their names, close the rounds. It's easy. Laughter from a bar in the recording followed. Faces turned as white as the projector screen. Michael's hand flew to his mouth. Investors fumbled for their phones. Mark's lawyer stood, stammering about admissibility. The judge of public opinion had already decided. Mark lunged toward me, rage overriding stagecraft. "You put those words in my mouth," he snarled. "You planted this." His hand knocked a stack of brochures free. They fanned onto the carpet like fallen cards. "I didn't plant anything," I said, quiet and cold. "You planted yourself in my name. You used my service as bait." I looked at Michael, then at Karen. You can still say you believed him, or you can say you stood with the truth. The room held its breath. Then, from the back, a voice I respected more than any title, Detective Marquez, sitting incognito, stepped forward. "That recording is authentic," he said, "and we have copies of the bank audit showing transfers out of Hayes' accounts to Whitmore-controlled entities." Mark's face crumpled. Not a politician's mask now, but a man exposed. He tried to speak, but his words were small and thin. Cameras clicked. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Whitmore, how do you respond to allegations of forgery and fraud?" He opened his mouth and closed it. For the first time, the practiced answers failed him. I closed my binder slowly, feeling the room's weight lift off my shoulders like a hand finally unclenching. But I didn't raise my voice to celebrate. I only said one thing, low enough that it landed like a verdict. "You tried to erase me with paper and smiles. You chose the wrong name and the wrong war." As murmurs rose into a roar, Mark stumbled back, eyes darting for an exit. Investors whispered about freezing funds. Michael looked at his father, then at the binder, and for the first time since this began, his face had the question I'd been waiting for. Was this the day the board finally cut him loose? The fallout came fast. Within 48 hours of the shareholder meeting, 3 local papers ran headlines. Whitmore Ventures under scrutiny. Forgery allegations surface. Mark's smile was plastered across the front page, right next to words like fraud and federal inquiry. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I came home to a plain white envelope jammed under my front door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet. "Old man, stop before you bury yourself. Accidents happen in icy weather." No signature, but I didn't need one. The stink of Mark's desperation clung to every word. That night, Michael called. His voice cracked through the static. "Dad, Uncle Mark says you're making a fool of yourself. He says the stress is making you delusional. People are saying you're senile." My grip tightened on the receiver. "Do you believe that?" Silence, then soft. "No, but he's convincing everyone else." The line went dead. 2 days later, a thick letter arrived from Mark's attorney. Cease and desist, accusing me of defamation. Bold type threatened lawsuits, damages, full legal remedies. The irony of a forger screaming about slander made me laugh out loud. I didn't face this storm alone. Sam had my back, but I also needed someone who understood law, not just loyalty. That's when she appeared. Rachel Nguyen, a sharp-eyed attorney barely in her 30s, daughter of one of Sam's old poker buddies. She'd cut her teeth exposing shady developers in Phoenix. She came to my kitchen with a laptop and a steel briefcase. "Mr. Whitman," she said, sliding the forged loan file across the table. "Wow. This isn't just forgery. This is wire fraud, bank fraud, and identity theft. Each one carries federal weight. If we play it right, Mark doesn't just lose his business, he loses his freedom." I leaned back, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. He's already trying to scare me off. Notes, threats, lawyers. Rachel's eyes didn't waver. "Good. Means you're over the target. And now he's about to make his biggest mistake, because he doesn't know I'm in this with you." That night, as I slid the chain lock on my door, I realized the game had changed. Mark had escalated from smirks and speeches to threats and shadow wars, but so had I. And this time I wasn't just the old widower with forged papers in a binder. I had allies, loyal and legal, and together we were building a case strong enough to slam the cell door behind him. 2 weeks after the cease and desist letter, Rachel called me into her downtown office. Papers were stacked on every surface, and her laptop screen glowed with scanned documents. "Walter," she said, sliding a folder toward me, "we've got it. Physical proof number 2. I opened the folder and stared. Inside was a spiral-bound notebook, pages filled with Mark's blocky handwriting. Meeting notes, contact lists, dollar amounts scribbled in the margins. But halfway through, the tone shifted. "Walt's name works. Investors trust him. Play the veteran card until launch. Then shift liability back on him. He won't fight at his age." My chest tightened as I read. Page after page, Mark had documented his scheme like a narcissist writing his own indictment. There were even phone numbers of investors he'd targeted, with stars next to easier marks. Rachel leaned forward, tapping the margins. "This isn't just a notebook, it's a confession. And better yet, he left it in his briefcase when he rushed out of a deposition meeting with a bank officer. The officer, smelling something rotten, gave it to me." Sam whistled low from the corner chair. He hung himself with his own rope. But that wasn't all. Rachel clicked her laptop and played a voicemail. Mark's voice, slurred, angry. "You think you can drag me down, old man? I built this family's future, not you. You won't survive without me. You're finished." Rachel stopped the audio. "Threats, recorded. That's admissible." For a long moment, I sat there with the notebook heavy in my lap. The words play the veteran card burning holes in my chest. All the humiliation at church. The whispers in grocery aisles. The pitying looks. It was all deliberate. He hadn't just forged my name. He'd plotted to erase me, to weaponize my life story against me, like I was nothing more than a pawn. But now, the balance shifted. "Rachel," I said slowly, "how fast can we get this in front of a judge?" She smiled, thin, sharp as glass. "Not long." But I was thinking, why stop in a courtroom? His next board meeting is in 3 weeks. Investors, family, community figures. That's the perfect stage to drop this bomb. Sam chuckled. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard from him in years. Now that's justice. Public, clean, permanent. I closed the notebook, fingers steady. For the first time in months, I wasn't carrying the weight of shame. I was holding the lever that would topple the man who tried to bury me. And I wasn't going to wait in the shadows anymore. This time I was going to break him in front of everyone he thought he controlled. The boardroom smelled like new carpet and stale ambition. A dozen men and women sat around the long table. Investors, legal counsel, and a few board members who'd backed Mark's empire from day one. Mark walked in first, chest still puffed with the reckless confidence that had carried him this far. He gave a practiced nod to the room, the kind that said everything was under control. I walked in last, Sam at my side, Rachel behind us, with a slim folder she didn't need to open. The hum in the room shifted when I set my binder on the table. Deliberate, slow motion. Cameras from a local station had been tipped off. One of the investors insisted on a written statement being read into the minutes. Mark's smile flickered as eyes turned to mine. The CEO called the meeting to order. "We're here to review Q2 performance," he began, and then paused as Rachel stood and asked for a moment to address the board. "This is being recorded," she said simply. "We represent Mr. Walter Hayes. He has evidence that directly implicates Mr. Whitmore in fraud, forgery, and intentional misrepresentation of investors." Voices rose. Mark's lawyer opened his mouth, but Rachel raised a hand. "Give me 3 minutes." She started with the bank-certified copies, loan documents, notarized papers, the forged signature. She placed the Valley First folder center stage. "Forgery," she said, "identified by a certified handwriting analyst. Driver's license photocopy supplied with the loan application. Manipulated." An investor from Boston leaned forward. "Show us the chain of transfers," he said. Pete, who'd flown in at Rachel's request, projected the audit onto the screen. Arrows and totals mapped the route. $250,000 from Hayes's account to an LLC controlled by Whitmore. Subsequent dispersals to car dealerships, a real estate down payment, and overseas accounts. The room went very quiet. Then Rachel pulled the spiral notebook from the folder, the one Mark had thought he'd left safe in his briefcase. She read aloud, page by page. Mark's own words: "Play the veteran card until launch. Shift liability to him. He won't fight." The phrase landed like a slab of concrete across the table. A ripple of disbelief ran through the investors. "Play the veteran card?" someone repeated, as if hearing the cruelty for the first time. Mark's face had gone paper white. Sam's nephew queued up the recording. Mark's voice filled the room, offhand, arrogant, admitting intent. The room's air changed. Men who'd once toasted Mark's vision now stared at the soundproof walls like they'd been punched. Mark tried to talk. Lawyer interposed objections. Accusations flew. He lunged toward the podium, hands trembling. "This is a setup! He planted those notes! He's been obsessed!" he barked. Rachel didn't flinch. "You left a trail, Mr. Whitmore. You documented your plan. You threatened Mr. Hayes. You spent his money and plastered his name across marketing materials without consent. That equals fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and, given the forged signatures, criminal exposure." Some board members stood, faces tight. "We need to freeze accounts," muttered one. Another pushed for immediate suspension pending investigation. An investor who'd lost 6 figures slammed his hand on the table. "This is unacceptable. We call an emergency vote." Mark's world unraveled in the space of 12 heartbeats. Phone calls began across the room. Lawyers advising caution, a bank official confirming receipt of Rachel's certified complaints, murmured talk of SEC inquiries. The board chair looked at Mark as if seeing him for the first time. "Effective immediately," she said, voice flat. "You are suspended from all duties pending full legal review. We will convene with counsel to determine next steps." Mark's protests dissolved into pleading, then into a hollow silence as deputies from the county compliance office, tipped by Rachel the night before, stepped into the room. Documents were handed over. Phones were seized. The investor who'd once called Mark untouchable now avoided his gaze. As they led Mark out, his eyes locked on me. Hate, fear, disbelief. He said something then, a garbled string of threats and name-calling, but it had no purchase. The room's judgment had already been made. I closed my binder and felt something settle, not victory in the petty sense, but a quiet reclamation. The man who had tried to erase me with forged ink would stand in the light, where everyone could see the truth. Sam clapped once, softly, and Rachel placed a hand on my shoulder. "We'll take this to prosecutors," she said. But for now, the board did what it should have done. Outside, reporters shouted questions into cell phones. Neighbors who'd once nodded politely now stared. Michael found me in the hallway, eyes red, voice tight. "Dad, I'm sorry. I should have listened." He didn't ask me to forgive him yet. He just stood there holding the space where apology would begin. In the wash of fluorescent light, I thought of Sharon's quiet voice telling me to keep the ledger straight. I thought of every hour on the line and every honest signature. Mark had tried to rewrite my life with a pen. Instead, I'd used that same paper to write the final chapter. When the deputies closed the door behind him, I let out a breath I'd been holding for months, and the last thing I said to myself, soft, steady, was this: "You don't get to erase a man who remembers how to read the numbers." In the weeks that followed, Mark's empire collapsed like rotten timber. Banks froze his accounts, prosecutors prepared indictments, and the family that once clapped at his toasts now whispered his name with shame. My forged debt was erased, my name cleared in black and white. For the first time since Sharon's funeral, I felt the weight lift off my chest. I downsized to a smaller place near Michael and Karen. The house is quiet, but not empty. Not anymore. Michael visits often, humbled, trying to rebuild trust the right way. I spend my mornings with coffee, my evenings with Sam at the VFW, and when I look at the binder on my shelf, I don't see betrayal anymore. I see proof that even when you're written off as too old, you can still fight back and win. If you've listened this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories Men U60 USA, because stories like mine deserve to be heard.